The Japanese language is really hard to learn if you're used to a romantic language, or a Germanic one, like English. I think English is Germanic. The sentence structure is completely different, and I know I can't remember his writing in addition to speaking. I'm pretty sure it's one of the hardest possible languages out there to learn. So if you're going to Japan and you want to learn the language, keep in mind that you first need to nail the grammar down before you can expect to really start to sound natural. And you probably won't sound natural unless you've been trying really hard in the country for probably a year. After 6 months, 6 months is about when I start to feel comfortable in the country and being able to make my way around. But it still takes a lot of work to be able to understand people naturally and fluently without a lot of hiccups. But so the biggest things to keep in mind about the Japanese language is, like I said, the structure. They put their verbs after their objects. So instead of saying the cat jumped over the log, you would say the cat over the log jumped. So that's really strange. And it seems pretty simple saying it like that, but it really causes you to change the way you think, even, because just the way we'll pause during a sentence, you would pause at a completely different point in a Japanese sentence, you're more likely to try to worry about how to finish it up, because they'll often kind of do a lot of things, put a lot of stuff in the sentence. And then as you're approaching the end, then you'll get more pauses and hesitations to be like, okay, now how to piece it all together. Whereas I feel like in English, you get more pausing in the middle. How am I going to continue this? So it's a pretty different structure. It's a pretty different world, even just inside the language itself. Even outside of just syntax and structure, you also have a lot of cultural differences in the language by itself. For one, you have 3 different levels. So in English, and I think similarly in other languages, I'm not that familiar with others, you will change your language a little bit when you're trying to be polite. You'll speak a little differently. You'll refer to people specifically in kind of different ways, and you'll probably speak a little slower. But it's kind of more of it's a much more subtle difference. In Japan, you have effectively 3 different languages. You have impolite or informal, and then you have traditional polite, and then you have business polite. And most people like me, as Mormon missionaries that went to Japan, we didn't really learn the business formal so much, and that's the one that we struggle with the most. When we had to order things online or on the phone, it would be a huge struggle to get the right things across because they would just speak totally differently. You kind of want to just be just speak dumbly to me, okay? Speak super rude, please, because I would understand that better. But more common is the standard polite and standard impolite. In standard impolite, you'll speak it with your friends. You don't round off your sentences as much, I want to say. Words don't get quite as long, so instead of これをお祈りいたしましたという you would say これを祈った it's just much choppier is a lot of what it comes down to. And some of them will even change their tone of voice, especially when between kids among each other. You get a lot of oh yes, それを来ましたねって and it starts to sound almost gangster like. But yeah, what really struck me about one of the differences between English and Japanese is, again, how the culture impacts it. There was one time we had someone messaged us being hey, this sister has a birthday tomorrow, and just left it at that. And thankfully I'd been there long enough to be able to pick up to know that she was trying to ask us to do something for us. We're like, oh, so you want us to make her a card, right? And she's like, yes, please, and lots of thank you. And the way they work is they will never ask for anything outright. It's always, it's the more roundabout you are, in asking something, the politer you are, or even the more roundabout you are talking in general. It's a really common thing when you're listening, when you're in a more formal setting and people are talking, you'll hear a lot of kedo, like これをしてるけど、あなたがそのことを来るけど、これをしてねけど, like and kedo means like but, so it's kind of like a yeah but like at the end of everything because you don't want to sound like too confident, I guess. And that's not really it. It's you don't want to sound too forward because that can be perceived as impolite, and the idea being that when you ask someone something, partly because they're being super polite, they can't say no, and so if they don't want to do the thing, then they just won't acknowledge that you said it, I think. So yeah, lots of ways in which politeness affects the way you speak. It's most important to try to learn the stranger polite, just when that mid-level of politeness, not the business polite, because that's what you use to talk to people in the streets, how to greet someone you don't know.